Howdy, students. In the last chapter, we talked about our options for addressing climate change. In that chapter, we talked about mitigation, which refers to reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, therefore reducing the amount of warming that we have to deal with. There is widespread agreement that mitigation must form a major component of any valid climate policy. In order to mitigate, we need to rebuild our energy infrastructure away from fossil fuels and towards zero-carbon, climate-safe energy sources, such as renewable, nuclear, or carbon capture and sequestration. But how do we do that? In fact, you might wonder why it's not happening right now. In his famous book, Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith made the argument that the free market, where everybody pursues their own individual best interests, yields the socially optimal result. So if switching to climate-safe energy sources is the optimal result, shouldn't the free market be pushing energy companies to adopt those energy sources? The answer is no. While the free market works extremely well in most situations, there is a class of problems in which everyone pursuing their own self-interest actually makes people worse off. An example of this type of problem is the tragedy of the commons, which you may have studied in another class. To understand this in more detail, let's imagine that there's a manufacturer who makes a widget. The total cost of making a widget to the manufacturer is 90 cents. In the process of making the widget, the manufacturer causes some greenhouse gases to be emitted, which impose some costs on society, in this case 10 cents. These costs occur because sea level rises a bit, so coastal flooding gets a bit worse, temperatures go up, which requires people to run their air conditioners more, things like that. These costs are known as an externality, which is a cost imposed on people not involved in the transaction, you and me. What this means is that anytime someone buys a widget from the manufacturer, you and I get charged a small amount from the climate change that the production of the widget caused. The important thing here is that the total cost of the widget is $1. But the manufacturer is only paying 90 cents, and the price he sells it for reflects that cost. So the manufacturer and the purchaser are not paying the full cost of the widget. Here is the same data, but put into a table. Now imagine that someone discovers a new way to make the widget that doesn't release any greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. The rightmost column shows the costs. These costs are slightly higher to the manufacturer, 95 cents, but there's no externality because no greenhouse gases are emitted, so the total cost is also 95 cents. Because the total cost of making the widgets is cheaper, society would be better off if the manufacturer switched to this new method. But, and this is crucially important, the manufacturer will not switch. While the new method is better for society, it's not better for the manufacturer because he pays less under the old method because he's not paying the full cost. Because he can shift some of his cost to society via the externality, he stands to make more money by sticking to the old method. Economists call this a market failure, meaning that the free market is not producing the socially optimal result. Now, this example might seem contrived, but these kinds of market failures occur all over our economy. For example, it occurs when a power producer looks at coal versus wind energy. Coal looks cheap because the price of coal-fired energy does not include the full cost of the energy. Make no mistake though, we are all paying high costs from fossil fuel energy. The costs of climate change due to carbon dioxide emitted, the costs of air pollution, which kills tens of thousands of Americans and millions of people worldwide. These costs translate to reduced income, reduced economic activity, reduced productivity, degraded environment, etc. Now, economists have overwhelmingly concluded that switching to renewables would make everyone economically better off. But just like in the widget example, we are not switching because consumers don't pay the full cost of energy. This, in a nutshell, is why 81% of our energy in 2019 comes from fossil fuels. It's because of market failures. This also tells us why the free market alone won't solve the problem. To solve this problem and switch to renewable energies, we need government policy, which we'll talk about in the next video. And now, your moment of dog.